Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pre-show. It is time yet again for the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. I'm Robert Whitelaw. For those of you who have already joined me, welcome to it. Glad to see some folks jumping in right here in the pre-show phase. Some interesting things we could potentially talk about. I've got some news items to discuss that we could discuss if we want. I'm guessing we're going to run out of time because I have a feeling that the 50-year mortgage thing is going to take up a lot of time. And I don't want to really get into that one until we start the show officially, which will be happening in about 14 minutes when the official time is for the start. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in right now, whether you're on, I'm not even 100% sure here. If I should see it. And other than Facebook, you'll also see it right there on the screen when people make a comment. But I'll also repeat your comment and answer it. So feel free to jump into the chat and bring up anything that you like. I've got all the tools right here up, ready to go. So we can, if I don't know the answer right off the top of my head, I'm happy to explore the answers live so that everybody can benefit from that, both searching for it, because a lot of times I'll try to use tools that aren't just real estate agent tools, right? Obviously, I have access to tons of pay-for-it tools that I get because I'm a licensed real estate agent and broker, and because I pay for extra stuff. There's other data things I pay for, like ReVenture, for instance, is a good example, which is one I've shown here on the live stream before. So feel free to ask any questions you might have. Always happy to entertain them. Let me make sure my mic's even on. Yep, mic's on. I had turned it off for a while there, apologies. Just to make sure that we are, in fact, going. Pretty sure we are. Everything indicates we are in terms of all the different streaming tools. Let's see. Let's see, that's not right. There it is. Okay. Much better. Yep, we're live on YouTube. Seems to be going there. Some audio will go there. Let's see if we're up on X. X is always weird and semi-problematic. But let's see here. I've started checking in with X a whole lot more. So if you're interested in news items or anything like that, or any random thing that I might comment on X, go ahead and follow me on X. I think that would be worth your time if you're interested. I don't know how all these things got reset, but they did. Maybe it's just been that long since I've logged onto this computer. Wow, X is very serious about letting you log on these days. Like layers. Layers. All right, here we go. Let's see if we're streaming. And yes, we are. There it is. All right, I'm not going to go any further with that. All right, we're just under 10 minutes away from kicking things off live. I can see we've got one person somewhere. I don't know which thing. you're logged in on. But welcome. This is the pre-show where we will talk about anything you want. Just shooting straight about any topic that you might be interested in. And then, of course, once we hit the 10 o'clock hour, the show starts officially, and we're going to be talking real estate stuff relating to the numbers that we've seen in October, which is obviously the last month we have full numbers for. And we will see what kind of impact that stuff might have on us as buyers, sellers, or investors in this area. And then also big news items. And I think one thing that qualifies for that is the 50-year mortgage. We'll talk about that. I'm concerned about it, and we can talk about why once we get into the show. I'm debating whether I just do that first. Typically what we do is we cover the numbers and then we talk news items, but I think this 50-year mortgage thing might be worth hitting at the beginning of the show, and that way you can ask any questions. And for those folks who don't care about the numbers, we can just talk about the 50-year mortgage thing, and then they can not care about the rest of the numbers that we're going to talk about. We're just over 8 minutes before the live stream officially starts. Again, I encourage anybody with, even if you have a question that you don't want to answer in the pre-show, if it's something you want to talk about during the show, just go ahead and put it in here. I'll see it, I'll remember it, and we'll cover it as a topic as we go through the show. You know, the audio seemed, now that I think about it, let me see if the audio is good. What was that? You know, it doesn't seem to be good. I did some futzing around with a tool earlier, and I'm wondering if that has screwed things over. I put it back to what it was before I screwed with it this morning, or earlier today. It's already been a busy day. Let me see if that fixed it, because it sounded like there was artifacts there. I put it back to what it was before I screwed with it this morning. There it goes. It's all fixed. It's already been a busy day. I thought a higher sample rate would give me higher quality audio, but no, I don't think it did. So anyway, I'm glad I caught that early. When we did the YouTube, when I checked on YouTube, I could have sworn I heard some crackling. So glad I got rid of that. Welcome to the two folks who are currently, you know, I wish it broke it down by what platform you're on, but it doesn't, unfortunately. The thing I'm looking at is sort of a muxed dashboard of just how many folks are around. Thanks for joining me this morning. I know it's Saturday morning. We're all excited to be in the weekend. For some of us, I know we're looking at some cloudy weather out there. It's been raining here in Morgan Hill and throughout the Bay Area over the last week, which is fine with me. We can absolutely use it. So I'm not going to complain about some rain, but it's been interesting how warm it's been while it's been raining. So usually you're cranking up the heat, and it hasn't been necessary. In fact, I've got some windows open, kind of letting in that fresh air. We're about 5.5 minutes away from kicking off the official show. For those of you who just joined, we're going to be talking about the 50-year mortgage. I think I'll go ahead and do that first. We'll talk about that at the start of the show. Take any questions folks might have. Try to get a feeling. My guess is, just because it's I don't know why people. Well, you know, you would think Trump would be a very educated guy on real estate loans and whatnot, given his past as an investor guy. But we'll talk about the ups and the downs of it. I think it can be useful, but I think you need to be a super disciplined buyer in order for it to make any kind of sense. And I don't think it makes sense. Well, again, I don't want to talk about it till we get into it. I want to make sure as many people are here as possible for us to have that conversation. But if you have any specific questions about it, feel free to head on over to YouTube, Facebook,
Um, what else? X, any of those. I think X. Does X have a thing? No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can through X. But anyway, best ways are YouTube and Facebook. I think LinkedIn as well. I will see. Let's see what it shows me here. So it shows read only for X and LinkedIn, which is fine, right? Because as I said, I'll share that here. And then for YouTube, it shows it as read only, and you'll also see my reply. So that's all good. And then of course, for Facebook, you won't, unless I directly comment into the Facebook thing, because Facebook has to be all separate. This thing integrates with Facebook, but really poorly. So I do it manually on my end. But again, we're going to kick off the show here in about 3.5 minutes. Had someone just come in and go out real fast. That was weird. They were just shocked. My ugly mug scared somebody away. But anyway, so feel free to check in with me if you've got any questions. It doesn't have to be about the 50-year mortgage. It could be about any recent data or the data we're going to talk about in today's live chat. I'll be happy to do that with you. I'm trying to think if there's been anything, I'm actually in the process of, and what's funny is I've done this so many times for so many clients. I'm in the process of shopping for contractors to do work on my house. I'm looking for doing a remodel of the kitchen and a few other things. Potentially getting the home ready for putting it on the market next year, which is something I might do. And that's been an interesting experience. Huge ranges from all 3 of my bathrooms getting remodeled for about $34,000 plus any material upgrades, which according to the guy I've been talking to adds $2,000 to $6,000. So we're basically talking $40,000, to another guy who was only going to remodel the master for $35,000 plus the same proviso in terms of more money for like the cabinet or the physical thing. So definitely a decent chunk of change to make that stuff happen. And a lot of folks, I mean, like me, may be thinking about those sort of things in the context of, well, I want to get maximum dollars for my home. And you'll want to sit down and do the math to figure out, will it add more value to my home than it's going to cost me to get that done, right? So in my case, I think I come out in the positive. I think in terms of how more quickly the home would sell and how much more attention it would get, I think that would offset the cost involved. But I'm also a little bit of a do-it-yourselfer. But given how busy I am, I'm really not sure how much time I could. I kind of started one project in the downstairs bath here, and I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. And it's electrical. I would prefer to use the professionals for like electrical and things like that. So, all right, we're about a minute away from starting the show officially. As I said, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with, I think, a talk about the 50-year mortgage. I want to do a shout out to Scott Blasius. He is unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity to actually do business with him, but he's a real estate agent up in Sacramento, and I've known him for years, virtually. We've never actually met, but he was a big listener to the podcast and was always interacting, and I was always having great conversations with him about stuff. So number one, if you need to buy, sell, or invest in Sacramento, please call Scott Blasius. He's fantastic. I think his head's in the right place. Even though I haven't done business with him directly, he seems to get it, right? He understands what priorities should be and how hard you need to work to do the best job for your people. So, and that's a rare thing. I don't encounter folks with that mindset. And you can't, the mindset, I think, is just something you've got, right? It's too many agents are taught the wrong way to do real estate, or not the wrong. It's a profitable way to do real estate, but it doesn't give the best service to the clients. So I'm not a huge fan of the way most agents get trained these days. But it's a whole other conversation we could have about how that works. I've been complaining about that one forever. That's why one of the reasons I started the podcast back in 2007 was that. And Scott Blasius reached out to me this week. He's like, "Hey, are you just done with the podcast?" It's been over a year since I've done the last episode of the podcast. I don't think it's done. I think I'm going to come back to it, but I'm revisiting the mindset that made me start it in the first place. All right. Welcome to it, everyone. This is the November 2025 real estate, coffee and real estate live chat. I hope you all got your favorite coffee. I had my favorite coffee, but I have drunk it already. It's already been a long day. There you go. That was the dregs of the of the coffee that I had left. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in California, helping people in Silicon Valley achieve their buying, selling, and investing real estate goals, and have been since 1988. So it's been a very long time. I've got a lot of mileage on my real estate career, which has been interesting, and I've seen a lot of interesting things. And I'd love to have an opportunity to earn your business by chatting about what your goals are and how I can help you achieve them. So with that in mind, just, that's the big plug from me. If you want to find out more, you can go over to soldbyrobert.com. And you can reach out to me there. You can reach out to me through any of these methods available here via Facebook or YouTube or any of the others. I'd be happy to chat with you. All right. So let's jump into it. I think in terms of, I do have an audience on Meetup. We've got about, I don't know if it's 320. I don't know how many people are part of the Meetup group that I created relating specifically to the Coffee and Real Estate live chat. Had some interactions with them, had some interactions with some other people. And the biggest questions I've been getting have been around the 50-year mortgage that's being talked about by the current administration. So I thought it would be a good idea to jump into that. So let's go ahead and talk about the 50-year mortgage. Let's talk about whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. Let's just go right here so you can see what I'm seeing. Now, this is from Redfin, and I thought they did a pretty reasonable summary. And what I'm going to do is sort of just glide through this and discuss the real-world implications of a 50-year mortgage. Now, right at the outset, let me just share that I think there is a usefulness for the 50-year mortgage, but you would need to be an extremely disciplined borrower in order for it to make sense for any period of time, or an investor who simply needs a loan that's going to give them the lowest holding costs until they liquidate the property, right? If you know you're only going to hold the property for a very short period of time, this loan might make sense to you, right? But let's go ahead and hit it. So this is from Redfin News. I'm not always a huge fan of Redfin News, but in this case, I think they got a lot of good points. And so the first thing that kind of jumped out to me was this quote from Chen Zhao. Redfin that's the head of their economic research group. Said, quote, the longer term, the more uncertainty there is. So lenders would likely need to charge higher rates. But there are few examples of bonds with this kind of duration, so it's hard to know ahead of time how much higher a 50-year mortgage rate would be. So we'll see how that plays out. I think that's an interesting thing to posit, but I think that the effectiveness of the 50-year mortgage is going to be a thing that embraces lower interest rates. Meaning at the current 30-year level, or just a point something, not a whole percentage point higher, right? Or this doesn't make any sense. And we're going to go into an example here of why that wouldn't make sense. So we can see here, as a baseline for comparison, we can look at the expected monthly mortgage payments for a $500,000 home where a buyer used a 20% down payment. While it's impossible to predict the difference in mortgage rates would be, we use a 6.2 rate for the 30-year mortgage and a 6.7 rate for the 50-year mortgage. I don't think that's entirely nuts. I think that's a pretty reasonable guess. I think it might actually be a little bit on the high side. We're basically talking about a 0.5 percentage point difference. My guess is they'll shoot for probably around a 0.3 difference, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, and the numbers, we're talking a handful of dollars here in terms of the monthly savings that you would experience doing it this way. So for a 30-year at 6.2, it's $2,450. For a 50-year at 6.7, it's $2,315. So under this scenario, a borrower would save $135 per month under the 50-year mortgage. So not a huge chunk of change. It might be a big chunk of change to some folks. And in terms of someone who just wants to get the lowest possible payment, because that's what needs to happen right now in order for them to purchase, fine. what gets crazy here is the first trade-off to consider for a potentially lower monthly payment under a 50-year mortgage is the amount of interest paid. And this one is mind-boggling. And it's why if you were going to buy a house and you wanted to buy a house, live in it, and stay in there forever, right? And that's something I strongly suggest. Circumstances may indicate to you that you're not going to hold on to that property, but I always like to promote to sellers, hey, why don't you keep it, make it an investment property and charge rent, and then move on to the next house if that's possible. Sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes the funds are absolutely needed. A good example is me. In my case, I don't want to rent this house out. I want the money. There's a whole, we could have a whole podcast about that one. So in terms of what are the bullet points that I consider when I'm thinking about, do I sell this home or do I rent this home, right? When I have a conversation with sellers, we can have a conversation about that. But check this out. I'm intentionally not scrolling down any further just yet. This is the difference between the 30-year and the 50-year mortgage. Interest paid over the life of the loan, $481,993 versus $989,195. This is a huge transfer of wealth from you to whoever's holding that note, whoever's holding that mortgage. So I don't believe that it would make sense for anyone to get a 50-year mortgage. And as I mentioned at the top, you need to fall into one of two categories, I think. Somebody who is an investor who needs to hold this property for a super short period of time, and you just need something to hold it, and you just want that lowest monthly payment, right? And you haven't negotiated some other creative thing, right? Like maybe you've negotiated a loan with the seller and it's a 0% loan for the first 6 months. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that could happen. Let's just talk about mainstream stuff. Only two scenarios. You're an investor and you need that lowest payment, or you're a long-term person who's going to live in that house for a super long time, raise your family, whatever you're going to do, but you need to be super disciplined. You would need to, in order for this to make sense, overpay towards principal, particularly on the front end of the loan. It makes the most sense to pay at the front end of that loan to get the highest impact. Also true of a 30-year mortgage. If you're going to try to leverage it. But here's the reality. Because your theory might be if I hit a really tough point financially, I want to save money each month. I don't want to pay as much. I don't think this represents enough of a savings to be worth that. Because you could obviously do the same thing with a 30-year mortgage. And we're talking about $135 basically in this example, or $260 if we double this, right? If we assume $1 million purchase. But I honestly don't see it as worth it to you. Now, you'd want to run the numbers on your scenario. I say always consider it. Always have it be one of your options as you're looking at your loans, just like you should look at every other kind of loan. You should look at, adjustable rate loans. You should look at fixed rate loans. You should look at 15-year, 30-year, 50-year, if a 50 is available. But in terms of your financial future as a buyer, in terms of your equity that you get in that house over time, this is a horrible deal for you. And as we get into that subject, it also reveals some things that are concerning to the housing economy overall, right? And so we'll get into that here. This is equity that's been built, right? And let's remember what equity is. Equity is skin in the game, right? One big problem we had back in 2007 and 2008 was people were willing to walk away from mortgages because they had no equity or they had negative equity, right? So one thing that is, I believe, important for a robust lending world is you need to get buyers into a position where when bad things happen, they want to do everything they can to stay in a home because of the equity they have in it, right? If you are sitting in a home and you owe $500,000 and the home is only worth $450,000, your willingness to simply bail on that mortgage gets a lot higher, right? Now, granted, this is linked with a 20% down, so in theory, you should have equity in the home built in because you've already dropped a huge chunk of cash. But let's all be realistic. Just like every other lending method, systems are going to come up that allow you to put less than 20% down. That'll obviously increase your monthly payment, but it'll get you into a house. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute too. So here you go. 30-year mortgage equity after 5 years, right? It's laughable, right? So after 30 years, it's paid off, right? But coming up to about $500,000. You're only up to $193,000 in equity after 30 years with a 50-year mortgage. So think about how much that expends or extends a low equity position for a buyer. The principal shrinks, but much more slowly, right? What was one of the things that killed us in 2007 and 2008? As I said, it was people willing to walk away from their mortgage. There were examples of people buying a house across the street. So home values had dropped ridiculously, right? There were several examples right here in Santa Clara County where somebody who was about to stop paying their mortgage bought a house across the street with the same floor plan because property values had dropped so much. In some areas, it had dropped 20 to 30%. If you were in Gilroy, some of the property value drops were insane. So people bought a house in the same neighborhood, literally within view of the home they currently lived in, moved into that new home, and just stopped making the mortgage payments on the other house, right? I mean, that was the thing that happened. I was involved in a transaction where that happened, which blew me away. Never would have thought someone would just bail on that, but that's how it ended up. Let's see here. All right, so and that was kind of the end of this, but this needs to go way further than this. While this kind of demonstrates how it really isn't a great deal for buyers, and I've gotten tons of people in social media who've kind of responded to me with, so don't get a 50-year loan. Who cares? If you don't think it's good, then don't get it. Well, it's a mushroom cloud of bad things, because imagine where this is going to go, where 50-year mortgages are going to go. First of all, they're going to be federally insured, right? And you can also bet that they're going to get sold on the secondary market. And the folks who will get this kind of loan are going to be the most subprime lenders we've ever loaned money to. So think about what that meant back in 2007, 2008. It meant 1, 2, 3% down. It meant very close numbers, sometimes getting a loan of 110%, crazy stuff, right? People who had very low credit scores. It was insane, right? We were ignoring all kinds of stuff. We were going on stated income in a lot of cases, right? And we could have another conversation about how we're still doing that, but from the other side. Instead of ignoring credit ranking stuff, we have fooled with credit ranking stuff to make things that shouldn't be good credit indicators of good credit. But I did a podcast about that a year and a half ago, but you can go check that out. You can find it on my website, soldbyrobert.com. So imagine this. We create a whole new category of subprime borrower, riskier than all the other subprime borrowers we've ever had since homes started getting sold. It's federally insured. It's going to get sold on the secondary market. And one of the things that makes a thing able to be sold in the secondary market is you have to check all these check boxes that the federal government puts out, right? And the federal government leans into just getting people in houses. They want to have that number that say, hey, this 60% of people own their home. 80% of people have bought their home. And when you focus on that rather than the qualifications of the borrower, you always create a 2007 or 2008, eventually, right? So who's on the hook? If you have a federally insured loan that can get sold on the secondary market that then gets bought by the GSEs, government-sponsored entities like Fannie and Freddie, they end up buying all that stuff, and the banks no longer hold that as a risk because they've sold it. So the government, us, the taxpayers, assume all the risk of those loans. If you wanted to create a mechanism to give us the next big real estate crash, I think that the 50-year mortgage would be a critical part of that strategy. So it's not just about, is it bad for borrowers? I think it's a hosing of borrowers. I think it makes you don't own your home at that stage. It's a 50-year mortgage. The odds are you're 30 when you get that mortgage, that you're in your 30s or 40s. I think it's a very poor decision for anybody who's thinking they're going to do this for the entire life of the loan, that they're going to do this to purchase their home. I don't think it makes sense from an interest rate standpoint. I don't think it makes sense from what you're supposedly winning or getting from it. And then the risk we take overall economically as a real estate economy, I think is also amazingly bad. So we'll see where this goes. If you've got any questions about this or comments, or if you think I missed a point, please feel free to chime in the chat. I'd be happy to entertain the subject with you. But I think you're going to have an awful lot of evidence to make me feel like I should be more comfortable with this. For those of us, particularly those of us who were real estate agents in the last downturn, and remember, I've been through a bunch of them, right? So I was through 2007, 2008. I was there in the early 2000s for the dot-com bust. I was there for the savings and loan stuff in the early 1990s. There was another one in there, I think, in 97 for something else. But these things happened, but 2007 was the worst. And when you look at the things that really caused it, a huge chunk of it was subprime borrowers. It was this facilitation, the political interference in the lending process, so you could wave a flag of, we are lending to underrepresented folks. Community Reinvestment Act, stinging banks that weren't lending to enough high-risk borrowers. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that were going on there that happened in the mid-90s that then gave us the 2000s, where values of homes or prices of homes skyrocketed because so many buyers were created artificially who normally wouldn't have qualified, who then became the subprime borrowers who fed that crash in 2007, 2008. All right. So again, reach out to me if you have any questions or you have any comments. I'd be happy to discuss it with you. But for now, let's go ahead and jump in and talk numbers. Now, where the heck am I? There we go. Now, as you know, if you've watched before, we do a review of all of the latest numbers when it comes to Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. And we do that as a top-down thing. That is a cheesy transition. I got to get rid of that. We do this because the highest volume of data points tends to give you more reliable data. You can see huge fluctuations in things when you're down at the Morgan Hill and Gilroy zones because there's so few things that happen in those markets. But Santa Clara County is huge. And if you're looking for overall broad strokes, what's happening in markets, it's good to look at the county data. But we also have so much variation in sub-markets that it's at least good to check in with these numbers. So that's why I organize this the way I organize it. But it also happens to be areas that I serve very strongly. So it helps that I'm talking about an area that I'm very comfortable with. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what we've got. Now, we're going to start, as we always do, with the total homes on the market. This is the marketplace. This is how many homes are up for sale. If you're a buyer, this is how many homes you have to choose from. If you're a seller, this is your competition. And the numbers we're looking at are year over year. So this is October of 2024 versus October of 2025, right? Makes sense? And the reason we do it that way is because we want to eliminate seasonal influences. Obviously, a December is very different from a July. So we simply ignore all of that stuff by focusing directly on year-over-year data. We'll look at what's gone on just chronologically over time in some charts in a bit, but this is a first good look at this data. So we can see in Santa Clara County, inventory is up 9%. Last year, in October of 2024, that number stood at 1,623 homes on the market. This year, October of 2025, Santa Clara County is seeing 1,768 homes, so a decent increase in the same time last year. If we look at San Jose, we can see it's a 10% increase. 788 homes were on the market in October of 2024, and 869 homes were on the market in October, of 2025. Now, in Morgan Hill, Another 10% increase. So far, pretty consistent. 84 homes in Morgan Hill in October of 2024. In October of 2025, we saw that go up to 92. Gilroy actually down in terms of overall inventory. 99 homes in October of 2024. And in October of 2025, we see 93 homes totally on the market in Gilroy. Next, let's take a look at the total new listings. These are homes where the sellers decided, I want to sell my home, and they were put onto the MLS as a listing. We can see all these numbers heading down from last year. So, which is interesting because notice we had an increases in inventory. So that first combination of data tells us homes are coming onto the market, but they're not selling, right? Because the only way we could see continuing increases in inventory when this number is declining is if homes aren't selling, if we're not selling off inventory from previous months, right? So something to keep in mind. Santa Clara County is down 2% from October of 2024 when it was 1,268 homes were listed. And in October of 2025, that number was 1,248. In San Jose, the number of new listings is down 3% from last year. In October of 2024, that number was 656. In October of 2025, that number was 635. Morgan Hill down 11%. 53 homes were listed in the month of October of 2024. In October of 2025, that number dropped to 47. Biggest drop overall was in Gilroy, just percentage-wise, for a 27% drop from October of 2024 of 59 to October of 2025 of 43. Next, we're going to talk about homes sold. And this is where we're going to sort of get a handle on what I was talking about a moment ago in terms of why is inventory increasing. Now, homes sold down from the same time last year in Santa Clara County, down 3%. 1,069 homes in October of 2024, 1,038 homes in October of 2025. San Jose saw 523 homes sold last year. And this year in October of 2025, that number dropped to 496 for a 5% drop. So it's always interesting to me when we see deviations between San Jose and Santa Clara County. San Jose is such a huge city that we often see these things going hand in hand in terms of percentage changes. So it's interesting to me that San Jose is seeing a bigger drop in the number of homes sold. Morgan Hill, 31% increase, 35 homes sold in October of 2024, 46 homes sold in October of 2025. And in Gilroy, up 11%. 35 homes last year in October of 2024, and in October of 2025, we saw 39 homes. So why is that interesting? Now, again, because of the smaller sample size, don't draw huge conclusions, but it's interesting to see this because it indicates a movement of interest within the county south. That tends to happen when buyers are trying to get better deals for their money. Gilroy has been a huge example of that. I think Gilroy, and in terms of how sellers are calibrated to what's going on in their local markets, Gilroy seems to be ahead of other communities where they've been pricing their homes more appropriately. And we'll see data to reflect that here in a minute. But I always like to pause at this moment and talk about how many homes were added to the overall inventory, right? If we sold more homes than we listed, we'd be taking homes out of the inventory, but we know that that's not what happened. So let's go ahead and run the numbers. In Santa Clara County, given the new listings and the total listings and the homes sold, we have added 210 homes to the inventory compared to the number of homes sold. In San Jose, we've added 139 homes to the overall inventory. In Morgan Hill, we've added 1. And in Gilroy, we've added 4. So still in a scenario where because remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were seeing us selling more homes than we were listing. So all the new listings were selling broadly. All the best examples of homes were selling. And then we were also selling off some inventory, right? So you were seeing that number dropping. That hasn't been true now for quite a while. So we'll see how that continues. Next, let's take a look at months of inventory. To understand the concept of months of inventory, you need to understand that what we're doing is we're saying, let's lock in what the inventory is right now, and let's lock in what the total number of homes sold was this month. And if we do that, if we kept subtracting that number of homes sold each following month from the overall total of inventory, how long would it take us to sell off every home on the market? So the higher this number is, the closer you get to being in a buyer's market, because that means inventory is huge, right, compared to what's actually getting sold. Nationally, 4 to 4.5 months is considered a balanced marketplace. And as you'll see from these numbers, we're not really there. Still leaning into a seller's market in terms of this number, but let's just go ahead and cover it. So in Santa Clara County, we had a 13% increase in the total months of inventory. So last year in October of 2024, this number was sitting at 1.5 months to sell off all of our current inventory. It's now up to 1.7 months in October of 2025. In San Jose, 20% increase from the same time last year, 1.5 months in October of 2024, and 1.8 months in October of 2025. Next, Morgan Hill, down 17%, which is interesting, 2.4 months a year ago, 2 months this year in October of 2025. Again, in Gilroy, also down, 2.8 months a year ago, and 2.4 months this year for a 14% drop. So very interesting that we're seeing a decline in the inventory in terms of solds versus inventory numbers, which is what this reflects, right? Okay, next, let us talk about months of inventory. No, we just did that. Homes pending and contingent. So what are homes pending and contingent? When you make an offer on a home and it is accepted, the listing agent will change the status of that listing to pending or contingent. Usually contingent comes first. Buyers have the opportunity to do their own inspections. Usually there's a loan involved, which is a contingency. The loan has to come through in order for the deal to go through. So this reflects that. This reflects those changes. The reason why we want to look at this number is it's a leading indicator of what we're going to see in terms of sold homes in the next 30 to 45 days, right? Because before you can go sold, you have to go pending or contingent. All right, in Santa Clara County, it's down 10%. 1,143 homes went pending in October of 2024. In October of 2025, that number dropped to 1,024. In San Jose, the number's down 5%. 547 homes in October of 2024 went pending, while 517 homes went pending in October of 2025. Morgan Hill, down 2%. Which is basically a wash, right? Because of the small sample size, I would call this on par with last year. But last year it was 41 homes went pending, 40 homes this year went pending. 2% in Gilroy, I'd say the same thing. Because of the small sample size, it's basically the same as last year. 48 homes last year, 47 homes this year. Next, let's talk about original list price. I get a surprising number of folks who ask me why I care about average original list price. And the reason primarily, and it's something I've always used, particularly when I'm representing a buyer, because I want to get into the mindset of the seller. What were the seller's expectations the day that they listed that house? Because that's what this number is. When that home was first entered into the MLS for sale, this is the amount that the seller was asking for on average. So when that listing agent was sitting in the living room of that seller and they were discussing, here's all the numbers about your market, here's the sales price I suggest you list it for, the seller came back and said either, yeah, go ahead, that's a great number, or said, here's the number I want you to use. But this is expectations. This is a way to get into the psychology of the seller at the time they listed the home. And now in Santa Clara County, expectation, think of it as an expectations number. What were sellers' expectations when they listed their home? And compared to last year in Santa Clara County overall, expectations are up 5.4%. We had $1,861,777 as the original list price in Santa Clara County in October of 2024. In October of 2025, that number went up to $1,963,047. So clearly, sellers on average think their home is worth more to the tune of 5.4% compared to the same time last year. And we'll see how true that is, right? When we look at the sales prices, we'll see how much over or under expectations sellers reached in the month of October. In San Jose, last year, $1,479,337 was the average price that sellers were hoping to get for their home. In October of 2025, that number is up to $1,515,427, and again for a 2.4% increase. So considerably lower percentage-wise when compared to the county overall, which is kind of interesting. Morgan Hill knocking it out of the park at 14.1%. $1,462,942 was what sellers were hoping to get a year ago on average. This year, October of 2025, they're hoping to get $1,668,576. We can take a look at this later. And remember, one reason why I take these as sort of mushy numbers when we get down to a small sample size is one home listing for $4 million in Morgan Hill can skew the average, right? Compared to everything else, which in this case, I think we've got a couple of almost $3 million homes that actually listed. So I think that clearly could qualify under that criteria. Next, let's see Gilroy down 5.8%. Again, Gilroy, one of the few places that I think are calibrated to the real market. Last year, $1,256,176 was the average hoped for price that sellers were going to get for October of 2024. In October of 2025, that number is down to $1,183,136. Again, a 5.8% drop from the same time last year, which is a complete about face from all the other areas that we've talked about. If you want to call me and talk about Gilroy, I think there's some amazing places in Gilroy. I frequently will talk to folks who are looking in Morgan Hill or looking in South San Jose, and really poo-poo Gilroy, and I don't think they should. There are definitely some beautiful areas in Gilroy that I think folks can take advantage of. And in terms of if you've got high school age kids or they're about to be high school age, Christopher High School is I think the best South Valley high school around. And that's not because my next door neighbor used to be the principal. She's awesome, by the way. But anyway, okay. Next, let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about, the average sales price. Where did these go? So we're going to talk about these compared to expectations after we cover all of these. So, average sales price. This is what folks actually paid on average for a home. And in Santa Clara County, that was up 1.9% from the same time last year. So, in October of 2024, we saw homes selling for $1,997,283. In October of 2025, that number went up to $2,035,677. So, well, we'll talk about the net later. Hold on a second. So, San Jose was actually down from the same time last year. Last year, $1,532,248 was what sellers were getting in October of 2024. There was a 0.6% drop in that number in October of 2025 to $1,522,938. In Morgan Hill, a 7.6% decline, $1,630,190 in October of 2024, dropping to $1,506,457 in October of 2025. In Gilroy, 19.3% increase last year. $1,158,329 was the average sales price in Gilroy. $1,381,831 was the average sales price in October of 2025. And as I said earlier, don't get excited about that one. We did have a property in Gilroy that sold at an extremely high level, very much a luxury property, which kind of skewed that a little bit. And again, when we're talking about how many homes sold? 39 homes sold in Gilroy. It's just going to take one home to completely throw those numbers out of whack. So where do I think the real number is? If we corrected for that highest price, I think we'd see it closer to $1,150,000, right? About flat. I don't think we would have seen a big increase, maybe a slight decline in terms of setting buyer expectations, right? But these are the numbers as they are, so I don't want to get accused of tweaking the numbers to try to get it one way or the other. I'm just going to caution you that don't think, well, gosh, then on average I need to spend $1.3 million on a house in Gilroy, because that's really not the case. So now, how many of these sales prices reached the expectations of sellers, and how many fell short? So in Santa Clara County, on average, sellers made $72,630 over expectations. They got that much more than they originally hoped for. In San Jose, sellers on average got $7,511 over what they're hoped for, when compared to home sellers who were listing their home in that month, got more, this much more than that, $7,511. In Morgan Hill, when compared to October 2025 expectations, sellers got $162,119 below expectations. And then on the flip side, Gilroy got $198,695 over expectations when taken just as straight averages. And again, as I mentioned, if we corrected for some higher numbers here in terms of home properties that sold at the 2 million plus range, this would be a much smaller number. But again, I don't want to be accused of tweaking. I don't know, maybe I should have a slide untweaked and then tweak it for what I consider to be rational corrections to the data. But anyway, that's for another time. All right, now we're going to talk about percent over and under asking price. This one is one that has, and I'm going to fess up right here, I have been wrong on this one in the past. Last year, I thought this time last year, when we were, say, September, October of last year, I was absolutely anticipating that by the end of last year, we would be below 100%. Didn't happen. We've gotten there with a couple of communities, but we are still at a level with Santa Clara County in terms of how much over asking price people are paying that it kind of boggles my mind. So let's go ahead and hit it. In Santa Clara County, last year, October of 2024, we had homes selling for 105.2% of asking price, meaning 5.2% over asking price, right? At its worst, this was a double-digit number. We had homes selling for 10, 15. I think there was one that sold for 20% over asking. So just, we don't need to get into the weeds on this, but so this is way down from peaks, right? But we are down 1.7% net between October of 2024 and October of 2025, where the percent of asking price was 103.5. So in October of 2025, buyers were paying 3.5% over asking price. Still a crazy number, I think. I really expected this one to be much lower. I expected maybe 1% over asking, 2%. So interesting that in the county overall, this number is where it is. And it's also interesting to look at the county overall as to where this is happening the most. And I've got a little chart or a screen we can look at to kind of try to suss that out if you like. San Jose, 104.6% of asking price in October of 2024. In October of 2025, down to 102.1, so 2.1% over asking. This is where I thought the number would be at the county level, and I thought San Jose would be at about the same. Interesting that there are some markets where things are still, and it's the most desirable markets, right? It's some of the most desirable areas where you're seeing folks paying still way over asking price to the tune of 3.5%. So that was overall a net 2.5% drop from last year. Morgan Hill, 100% last year. October of 2024, homes were on average selling for asking price. Down 0.8% from that time period. Now in October of 2025, that's sitting at 99.2%. So just under asking price. Gilroy, it's down 2.9%, so 101.1% a year ago in October of 2024. In October of 2025, we're seeing 98.2%. So almost 2% discount. These are numbers I would use when as a buyer, you're calibrating yourself to what you might have to do. However, if you should have a real estate agent. If not, these are numbers you can kind of suss out yourself by looking at things like Zillow and look at homes sold and then look at the history and see what it was listed for and do a lot of manual math. But if you've got a real estate agent, when you decide to make an offer on a house, they should do a market analysis of that property as if they were going to list it so that they can have hardcore data to figure out, are things in this neighborhood selling for 3% over asking price, or are they tending to sell for 1% below? particularly if there's multiple offers. And that's the other thing we want to get into. This is a great indicator of how much competition there is still going on out there as it relates to these properties. If you're paying a 3.5% boost on the sales price, you're not doing that because you feel like spending more money. You're doing that because you were in a scenario where there were multiple offers and you were under pressure to beat out those offers. Welcome to the folks who just joined. Looks like we've gone up a couple of folks since we started. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them into chat, and I'll deal with them as we go through the live chat here. So that indicates in Santa Clara County overall, in a whole lot of places in Santa Clara County, we are seeing multiple offers on properties. Absolutely the case, and it's definitely a huge variation. There are tons of homes that are selling for under asking price, right? It depends on where they are, and a whole lot of that has to do with desirability, location, that type of thing. But in general, multiple offers. In San Jose, 2.1%, again, indicates multiple offers. Morgan Hill, and remember, when you're working with your agent, drill down to as close to just very comparable homes to the home you're making your offer on to figure out where it fits in the multiple offer scenario. I think that's a very important number to know before you start constructing your offer and figuring out what's going to be most attractive. In Morgan Hill, down 0.8%, 100% last year, 99.2%. We already talked about that. But what that tells us is you can go into Morgan Hill on average and come in below asking price and potentially get the home. It also implies homes staying on the market longer. Why? Because if there were multiple offers, they typically would have come within that first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the home being listed, depending on how long the listing agent said we're only going to look at offers at a certain date, right? However long that delay was. And in Gilroy, again, this number should tell you can come in there with some pretty aggressive below asking price offers and potentially get them accepted. So a lot of buyer leverage potentially in Morgan Hill and Gilroy, not a whole lot of buyer leverage in San Jose and Santa Clara County in general, which is when you're talking about the county, again, you're going to want to drill down into the local community. But just an overall bird's eye view, that's sort of the lay of the land for buyers right now. Next, let's talk about days on market. Given what we've seen, we would expect the highest days on market to be Morgan Hill and Gilroy, right? Because we just talked about percent over and under list price, and we're seeing homes are staying on the market longer. Now, as we talk about these numbers, in your head, kind of think about what equals sold immediately, because it's not 2 or 3 days on the market. Sold immediately is 14 to 18 days on the market. Why? Because the vast majority of agents are going to list a home and then say, seller will not entertain offers until such and such a date. And that is usually, I like to do 2 weeks. I like to do 14 days. I want to make sure I've got enough open houses that everybody who wants to see the house can see the house. There are a huge number of buyers out there these days that don't have an agent, so they want easy access to your property, and that means not having to get a real estate agent to get a realtor key to open the lockbox to get you into the house at some scheduled time. So I personally find that open houses are getting far more leveraged off of buyers now than ever before, particularly unrepresented buyers. All right, so with that in mind, Santa Clara County, 33% increase in the total number of days on market, from 21 in October of 2024 to 28 in October of 2025. San Jose up 47%, 19 days a year ago in October of 2024 to 28 days in October of 2025. Morgan Hill, 33% increase, 30 days in October of 2024. October of 2025 shot us up to 40 days. And remember, that's an average. So in looking at various numbers, I've seen homes that have been on the market for 60 days, 100 days that haven't sold. So again, this is an average, but it's an average that informs us that in this market, homes are staying on the market longer and sellers are having to take below asking price in order to get these things sold in many cases. Gilroy up 58%, 24 days in October of 2024. October of 2025 saw that jump up to 38 days. But Still an okay number, right? Not horrible. And a whole lot of that has to do with the fact that, as we noticed before, Gilroy has historically been better at being appropriately priced for the market that they have, right? Morgan Hill, not so much. There are still folks who think their home is worth far more. It's softened over the last year. I think Morgan Hill sellers have gotten a little bit more calibrated to what's really going on, and a lot of them, as we'll see in a minute, have realized that through price reductions. But I think that's a good indicator to show us a deeper understanding of why we're seeing Morgan Hill and Gilroy homes selling for below asking price, and then in San Jose and the county in general, seeing things sell for over asking price. All right. I see a couple of more people in the live chat on a couple of different platforms. Feel free to ask any questions you might have, and I will be happy to address them during the show so that everybody watching can benefit from the answers. All right, now let's take a look. This is just going straight back, right? We're not doing year over year anymore. We're doing just month to month numbers. And those red bars are Octobers of the past, right? The past 2 Octobers. So we can see what trend we can expect. First, we're looking at total active listings. And we can see last year, between September and October, we saw a decrease, right? And then September and October of this year, again, we saw a decrease. I am not a huge fan of using 2023 for a lot of things, primarily because it was March of 2023 when interest rates went nuts. So, and interest rates just went up and up and up and up over the course of the whole year. And I think they peaked in November or December. So this is not a typical year for real estate. 2024 was a little bit more typical, still a little bit weird, but you can see that the trend here is just down. Total active listings usually drops to in December, almost the lowest point. We can see December, the lowest point of the year. So 2024, December's the lowest. 2023, December's the lowest. And that is typical. If you wanted to bet money on anything, bet that the lowest inventory level for the year is going to be in December. The bottom line is people start taking their homes off of the market. They don't want to have people trooping through their house while they're trying to have Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that's what we tend to see here. What we have tended to see, though, is that after December, in some years, we've seen dramatic increases in the number of homes that get listed, right? Because you're getting 2 things. You're getting folks who took their homes off of the market for November and December rejoining the market, and you're getting new folks who've decided to list. And then we see these big jumps. My guess is we are going to continue to see a decline in the overall inventory, perhaps not as dramatic as this, given where we are. And some of this is just what I'm hearing as I'm talking to people. There are folks who really want to get their home sold. There are people who believe that the market is not going to get better from here, that if they want to get the home sold, it needs to happen now. And they are pushing now to get that done. And I think a lot of that is reflected in staying on the market potentially during the holiday season. However, there is another little interesting thing happening, and that is an opinion among a lot of sellers that they are going to see capital gains taxes waived on the sale of your primary residence. And a lot of folks are holding out for that. Let me suggest you do some math. And some of this is going to be guesswork, because that's something I thought about. And the bottom line is, I think that if that happens, if your primary residence suddenly has capital gains taxes waived on it, I think there's a high probability that a ton of people are going to put their home on the market. I think we will see a dramatic increase in inventory as folks list their homes under the assumption this may not be a rule that sticks around forever. And that increase in inventory will potentially reduce prices enough that you would have actually made more money if you sold the house with the capital gains taxes than without. Now, obviously, there'll be a cusp of that where that's not true, where it'll benefit you. But I think as you get further into that decision being made of that tax not having to be paid, as more people drop in and take advantage of that, the potential for that to not end up being a moneymaker for you is increased. So just something to think about. Next, let's talk about new listings. The trend obviously tends to mirror to some degree total active listings. We can see last year declining at the same rate. 2023 declining at the same rate. My guess is that we'll see, and it tends to be more of a dramatic decrease, right? As people just don't want to list their homes in November, December. I think we'll see pretty much the same thing. I don't see any big surprises in new homes listed, unless there's an announcement relating to dramatic reductions in the taxes you'd have to pay on your primary residence. Next, let's take a look at homes sold. Look at how flat that is. Really crazy flat from July all the way to October. Absolutely nuts. If you look at the past, October of last year, we can see typically October gets a little bump, just a little bump from September. And that's, this is really the final month that you get stats that I think reflect sort of the summer market, right? Because remember, if the home sold, it actually sold a month earlier, right? Because it accepted an offer a month earlier, and it took 30 to 45 days for that escrow to close, and you don't get a home marked as sold until escrow closes. So this actually represents homes that accepted an offer in September or late August. So you're kind of getting a little bit of a boost there. And then from there, it tends to drop. And from there, it tends to drop. I don't think we're going to see a change in that trend. I think that, and again, you see how it lags a month behind? See that? That's why. Nobody's buying in this month, so that's why you see a drop here. Does that make sense? Anyway, but what does that mean to us in terms of what we're seeing? Well, we've already got these ridiculously low home sold numbers where it upticks a teeny bit from September to October. My feeling is that we will see this continue to drop, but I don't think we'll see as dramatic a drop as we've seen in past years. I think what we end up getting is more homes staying on the market because they want to get their homes sold, which I think actually presents a unique opportunity for buyers to potentially get a better deal in these months than in past years where the inventory doesn't drop as much as usual. So if you're a buyer, just keep looking through November, December. Don't stop shopping because you don't want to do this stuff during the holidays as well. I think it's an opportunity for you to potentially get in on something that other buyers are going to miss. All right, next, let's talk about pending. Well, again, look how flat pending is. Crazy, right? Usually we've had peaks in pending in October in the past, in October of 2024. In October of 2023, not a peak. We had a peak in August that just steadily declined until it hit rock bottom in December of 2023. But we should expect this number to drop in 2023. If you are a buyer who follows the advice that I just gave you, then maybe this won't go down quite as much, but we should see this go down. But again, we'll see. We're in that weird point. There's weird things floating around in terms of 50-year mortgages, in terms of maybe I won't have to pay capital gains taxes. There's even the new person who got elected here in Santa Clara County. I can't remember their name. They're saying no more property taxes for seniors. Well, that's a huge deal. And they don't even, when they say seniors, they mean 60 or older. Now, in my head, I think, great, I would love to not pay property taxes. I pay crazy property taxes on my home. But then I wonder, what other tax are they going to do? They're not just going to not have that money anymore. There are still too many things they want to spend money on. Where are they going to get that other money from? So that's another element. That's something else that particularly recently with our election in November, that people are talking about the idea of not having property taxes on their property. And now you've got DeSantis in Florida also talking about property taxes. And that's a great one. We could have a great chat about property taxes. I mean, property taxes have existed since the 1600s in the United States, since before we were a country. In Virginia, right? Those were the very first property taxes. But it's also based on the feudal idea of giving money to the lord of the land. So I'm all for no property taxes. I think when you own your property, you should just own it. But it would be an interesting, perhaps over an adult beverage, to have a conversation about property taxes. Okay, where are we at? It's creeping up on 11 o'clock here. Now we're going to look at Santa Clara County list price versus sales price. Now, this is straight up just the list price, not the original list price. And we can see that we've again crossed over, and the average list price, oh no, it is the original list price, is below the average sales price. And I always love when these lines cross, because it's usually an indication you should look more deeply. It's perhaps an inflection point, particularly if it's a dramatic change, like when you get into these areas and say February, and you want to see, did it happen in the last February? And you can see, oh, it kind of did, but look at the distance between those two. But so expectations and reality haven't been too far off of each other, but we've had moments, man, where average sales price was really blowing out what original list price was. Particularly here, where original list price was much higher than what homes were selling for in late 2023. And it's also another reason, I think, to, and see, we see it again here in January. That's why I think it makes sense for folks to continue shopping during the holidays. I think that the fact that we get sales prices below original list prices to a greater degree during those timeframes, I think is a great way for folks to think about the market and potentially do the best thing for themselves they can in terms of their shopping. All right, next. Percent over asking price. This is just a historical look at it. You can see we were almost to 10% back in April of 2024. If we go back before 2023, these numbers actually go much higher. But you can really see the trend here. We sort of had this peak that starts to decline. This is, again, the county numbers, which, again, because of the sample size, better to use for broad stroke conclusions. But we can see we're actually up August, September, October. If we look at October, there was a peak there last year. October of last year, it wasn't. It was just part of a decline from September down to December. We can see that in December, we reached the low point for the year in 2024. And then we had a huge jump in February as more listings joined into the marketplace. Now, to explain this, all you need to understand is buyers are doing their thing. They kick right back in January, and new homes tend to come on the market in January and February. And what tends to happen is the best examples of the different kinds of homes that just list sell quickly, and they sell for more than asking price, right? The ones that are listed at that time that are less shiny examples of that kind of home in those neighborhoods tends to stay on the market longer. So you will see these numbers jump right when the market kicks off, because those most desirable homes are getting sold, and they're getting sold for way more than what the list price is, given the demand, right? There's just still too much buyer demand, and the months of inventory is what kind of indicates that. Where do I expect this to go? If we look at past Octobers, I would expect it to go down from here and bottom out in December and January. And remember, these are all based on sold homes data. So when you see January, what you're actually looking at is offers that were accepted in December. And when you look at February, you're actually looking at offers that were accepted in January. So I think we see the same thing. I think we see a bottoming out in December. Does it go below 100%? It could. It should, in my mind, but we'll have to see. There's still too many balls in the air in terms of desirability of the marketplace, other things enticing sellers, that type of stuff, as we talked about with taxes or property taxes and the other taxes that might get waived if it's your primary residence. So next, let's take a look at days on market. Let's see if we can't spot where our trend might take us. We can see in past years, days on market tends to increase, peaking in January. Now remember, this is a month. This is the days for the homes in December, right? Because the days on market is only counted once the home's sold. So we tend to see the peak of this, the total number of days, in December. And then we see in January, and we see in January here, it reached its peak. January, right? It reaches its peak in January, with that meaning that an offer was expected in December. And the reason why we will always see these kinds of numbers, where we see a big jump in a January, is because what's happened is buyers have come out in greater numbers and homes that have been sitting on the market a lot longer are selling. So this does not tell you, oh, things are bad for sellers. This tells you more buyers have come out and we're selling not only existing new listings, we're selling homes that have been on the market for a while. So that's kind of a way to explain that. So where do I expect us to go from here? In past Octobers, we've seen this sort of go up in both cases, and I would guess that would be true. But take a look at this. This is preceded by 2 months. This decline started in August. In August of last year, this stuff was just increasing, and then decreased a little bit for October. So this is another one that's a little bit in the air. It wouldn't surprise me if we see days on market kind of flattening a bit here, but with a little bit of an increase, and then an ultimate increase in December and January like we always do. I think that'll be the typical market change. Next, let's take a look at price reductions. These are homes. This is the percentage of homes on the market that had a price reduction. And I like to track this. I almost stopped. I started tracking this a while back because it was interesting to see how much pressure the market was under and how many sellers were having to reduce their prices. So let's take a look. Santa Clara County overall, it's up from last month. Last month, we saw 23% of the overall inventory reduce their price. 29% this month. But that's a 27% increase in the same time last year. So year over year, it's 27% increase. Month to month, it's a 29% increase. In San Jose, 25% last year, 31% increase, 25% increase last month, 31% increase this month, which is up 47% from the same time last year. So the year over year change in terms of how much sellers had to reduce their prices, big increases in the San Jose market. In Morgan Hill, 31% of homes were reduced last month, 30% this month, minus 7% from the same time last year. So the Morgan Hill market, based on this, is doing pretty well. And I think a lot of that just has to do with shifted attention from South San Jose down to Morgan Hill. This is kind of a weird cyclical thing, happens to Morgan Hill quite a bit. But oftentimes Morgan Hill is a little bit of a dichotomy because frequently the prices that you're going to find are higher than some prices of homes in the South Valley or in South San Jose. But Morgan Hill also tends to have bigger lot sizes, tends to be quieter neighborhoods, that type of thing. Gilroy, 27% last month, 26% this month in October of 2025. So actually fewer homes in October of 2025 had a price reduction versus 27% in September of 2025. But it's a 26% increase from the same time last year. So more homes are seeing a price reduction this year than last year. But when you compare it to these other areas, I think that's actually pretty reasonable. And again, Gilroy has tended to be more plugged in terms of properly pricing their properties. But the Morgan Hill numbers, every once in a while, we'll get something like this where folks are simply tending to get what they want for their property, despite the fact that when we look at over under price, it's 99.2. Right, was the percent over under asking price. So just about what they're asking for. Folks in Morgan Hill are getting about what they're asking for. And they aren't having to reduce their prices to do that. Okay, that takes care of that. I'd like to pause for a sec just so we can have a look at the chat, see if anybody's asked any questions. I don't see anything. Looks like we've got looks like we lost a couple of people at some point. We still have a few in there. If you've got a question you'd like to discuss, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll be happy to try and answer it for you. In the meantime, what we'll do is we're already at time, but we can do a couple. Do we want to do these? So let's do this. So let's go ahead and look at some of the things I've found today. Now, this is a search on Trulia only for auction homes. I like to do an auction home search every couple of weeks just to get a feeling, because every single one of these tends to be a foreclosure. A few days ago, none of these had prices on them. They all said get in contact or click for more, and they didn't show a price. But if you go to their websites, the prices were on the auction site website. But these are all auction properties. There is no guarantee that any of these will go for anything near what they're asking for it. But I thought that was interesting because this is a lot compared to what I usually see. Anecdotally, this is just sort of telling us that foreclosures are on the rise. But I just thought I'd share that with you because I thought it was an interesting one. Next, sellers are getting ghosted. 15% of home buying contracts were canceled in September. Yes, that happens. 99% of them are for financing reasons. We can see that back in 2020, we had a 16%. That's kind of the highest. But it wouldn't surprise me if this goes even higher. Home buyers are ghosting sellers at a higher rate in some parts of the country, mostly in Florida and Texas. In Tampa, which had September's highest cancellation rate, 20.1% of home purchase agreements were canceled, up from 17.7% a year earlier. Next comes San Antonio, where 19% of deals were called off, up from 16.8%. Fort Worth, Dallas, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, and Jacksonville are also among the metros where cancellations were most common. Riverside, California is on the list. I wanted to just, since it's a local city, I thought I'd throw that in there. But here, if you live in one of these markets and you're interested in purchasing, these high numbers are great for you. Nothing frustrates sellers more. Nothing freaks sellers out more. Nothing makes them more concerned than this. If you have a home that comes back on the market, and I'm currently looking at none of the house areas I'm looking at are these markets, but in a market I am currently interested in, I have seen homes come back on the market 2, 3, and even in one case 4 times after going into escrow and falling out. I love those because if I can go in there and say, I'll buy your house for all cash, but get a substantial discount, the likelihood becomes much higher because they've been through the ringer 3, 4 times with other buyers who couldn't get their loan approved. Because 9 times out of 10, that's what it is. Now, of course, this is a great tactic. I think everyone should keep it in mind, but also keep in mind that sometimes it's because an inspection revealed something horrible about the house. So just be aware of that. Now, sadly, there are instances where some folks will try to be more than arm's length away from those inspections so that the seller and the seller's agent never see them, so that in the next transaction they don't have to tell them about anything, right? I've encountered that a couple of times. All I can say to that is, if you don't have access to the inspections that happened with the last buyer, get your own inspection again. There is no greater insurance than a really rigorous home inspection. So that's happening in these markets. I would consider Tampa. I was in Tampa for a very long time back in the 90s, and I was in Clearwater, so I wouldn't have a problem with Tampa. I'm not sure I want to invest there right now, but and I wouldn't want to invest in Riverside, but and I don't want to invest in Las Vegas. For my money, it's too much of a one-horse town in terms of what it does. But I thought I'd share that number with you. Seller results. This is some stuff on the typical sellers. There's really nothing in here that's crazy. Let's see. This was, share of sellers by age. The 40 to 49 group is the biggest, with age 70 plus dropping down. We're seeing at this age group, we're seeing fewer folks deciding to sell their home, and I think that's a mixture of interest rates and not wanting to have to deal with the current market as a buyer. Buyers results, same kind of thing. Millennials, 31 to 45, share of buyers by generation. And again, declines here indicate these folks aren't becoming buyers because they're not becoming sellers, right? Because most of these folks have a house, and they're just not going into that. This is a little bit more something that's more relevant for other real estate agents when you're trying to figure out what generations might I customize what I do to help address their concerns relating to these kinds of things. Next, we've got the Reventure app. This is one of my favorites. I am on here probably at least once a day, or at least once every couple of days, looking at various forecasts they have going on. This is price forecasts over the next year. Boink. An overall market forecast for the future direction of home prices in the area based on the most recent trends in the local housing market. The home price forecast is calculated by Reventure using a proprietary algorithm. But in general, when I've had conversations with them, this is a reflection of where they expect prices to go, like over the next year. So you can see they expect this kind of, the 12-month forecast is positive 12.4. In Morgan Hill, they expect a drop of 1.6%. In San Martin, they expect no change. The reason why they expect no change in San Martin is I'm willing to bet there's almost zero data for San Martin. San Martin's way too small. They expect a 2.4% decline in Gilroy. And then we can see there's other areas here. Let's move it up. Where are some upwardly mobile areas we can see? Look at all the declines. Look at all these declines. What's interesting is a lot of these homes that are in the foreclosed bin that we looked at earlier on Trulia fall into some of these areas with the biggest declines. Negative 6.6, negative 8.4. These are some of the areas where those were. Negative 3%. I know there was one in that area. So something to keep in mind. But this is a great tool. If you've got any questions about that, or you'd like me to look at a specific area for you, this is national. So it doesn't have to be just us looking at Santa Clara County. It could be me. If you're interested in potentially finding out what the markets are doing in Las Vegas, we can look at that here. So feel free. This is the magic real estate agent thing. This is where all the super magic happens in terms of real estate agents. List price decreases. That's a pretty good number. Change to sold. Listing canceled. Pending. Nothing here we really need to discuss. Finally, as we wrap up the live chat, if I don't have any questions, I like to just give that final pitch for reaching out to me if you have any real estate goals you'd like to try to achieve, whether you want to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. One of the best tools that I have, and for those of you who know me, you know that every year I do a tech review of what I offer my clients. And right now I use HomeBot. And for my money, it is the best tool to get a idea of what your home might be worth. And you can do this. You can enter your address and it'll just tell you. You don't have to give me your email address. But if you'd like to get an update every month, plus access to all of these other tools, provide the email address. And basically what I strongly recommend my homeowner clients to do on a yearly basis, you will get those numbers every single month so you have a complete bird's eye view of what's going on with the value of your home, your loan, your options. And as soon as it becomes smart to refinance, these numbers will turn green. And you can click it and it'll connect you to a local lender that I have partnered with here in Morgan Hill. And you can potentially get yourself refinanced and save yourself some money. So just one of the many tools that are offered by this. Feel free to head on over to soldbyrobert.com to get access to it. This is the detail page for it, and you get to it by going to the instant home value. But if you're at the home page, you can do the exact same thing simply by entering your address here, and it'll give you that info. So again, thank you for spending your valuable time with me, whether you're watching this right now. It looks like I still have a couple of you on the hook. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions or any desires or goals that you want to try to achieve with your real estate world. I'm happy to help you buy, sell, or invest. Thanks for spending your valuable Saturday morning with me. Look forward to seeing y'all next month where we can see if our predictions are coming true. If you want to find me, head on over to soldbyrobert.com. Thanks for spending your morning with me. Have a good one.